Okay, so I put up a video roughly, I don't even know how long ago it was, maybe a couple weeks ago. It was a Let's Talk video talking about the PS4 running on 1440p, 120 hertz, 120 FPS over HDMI 2.0. And yeah, video got some attention, 1,500 views, 36 thumbs up. Thank you for everyone that liked, shared, and subscribed and hit the bell and all that stuff. But yeah, there was one comment that actually I just gotten literally about an hour ago. And it was this one here from the A. Shout out for this comment. You spawned this video. So it says I was thinking about going from a 4K 60 hertz monitor to a 1440p 120 hertz, but then I read that the PS5 still renders a game at 4K and downscales it to 1440p, so it still renders at 4K. And I think the PS5 will have trouble running the game at 120 hertz like that. So it really sucks. I don't want to downgrade from 4K to 1440p for a better frame rate. If the PS5 still renders the game at 4K, I hope you get me. Yes, I totally get where you're coming from right there. And so first answer to this is no. The PS5 will not like lose frame rate. In all honesty, it's downscaling to 1440p will make it run even smoother because there is a thing called checkerboard rendering anyways. And that's one of the reasons why I was like, okay, I'm going to make a video on this just to talk about a little bit about checkerboard rendering, because a lot of people still don't really realize that that's a thing. And they think that consoles run at native 4K, which most of the cases it does not. I think God of War is one of the few ones, and maybe Spider-Man possibly. I'd have to double check that stat, but so this video is not going to be about like an in-depth frame rate analysis or anything. I am going to use a couple other videos, namely Digital Foundry videos, because they do all that in-depth stuff, and this is where I actually learned about checkerboard rendering and how it runs and all that. So what is checkerboard rendering? This video is kind of a decent little showcase of it here. So basically, it actually renders each frame in a checkerboard pattern, and as you get closer to it, this is the reason why. So when you're in VR, like PSVR, you'll see this checkerboard rendering happening a lot because the screen is like right there in front of your face, and it's also a lower resolution, so there's a lot less pixels, so there's a lot more black spots in the screen. But yes, this is essentially what your console is doing with every frame, is doing a checkerboard pattern of rendering each pixel on the screen. This is to save on system resources and to actually help the frame rate get better because of this. So if you're running at 1440p, it's less of these pixels on screen. Therefore, the console can actually render even smoother frame rates other than doing something that would be a full-on 4K. Now, this happens with every single console. The Xbox and the PlayStation both do it. Just to show an example of it, this is Forza. You will, if you actually zoom in on this, you will end up seeing that there is some checkerboard rendering happening in this. Like I said, every game does it. Even I would even go as far as to say it's really just marketing. Is the 4K terms and all that stuff. It's really frame rate. That's what you end up noticing. So here's the other part of it too. 1440p to 4K, you're not going to see it as much. So let's I'll bring it over to, so this is PS5 versus PS4 with Horizon. So PS5 and PS4 Pro, as you can see on the screen here, there is difference. So the differences that ends up happening is, again, this is I do believe 4K. It's definitely checkerboard rendering. Like I said, every console does it. The only one that actually does native resolution rendering is PC, I do believe. I don't think the Steam Deck does it. Maybe Steam Deck does. I don't know. Steam Deck's newer, so I haven't really done as much research into the Steam Deck just because I don't really have a need for one. But I know like PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, they all do checkerboard rendering. And it's to try and save up system resources to make your experience as smooth as possible. Now, where it differs between a PS4 and a PS5, say, is you'll see in the distance here where there's red over here, so there's red right there. You won't see it over on the other side where the PS4 Pro is. So this is how they actually, they will downscale. So say if I'm streaming on Twitch or something, here, this is actually a solid thing. If I am streaming if I have a 4K signal and it downscales to 1080, it makes the 1080 look even better, but the frame rate will still be 60 FPS. Because when you're downscaling, it just helps everything else run smoother. Now in gaming, when you're trying to render, so the game engine itself, there's a pipeline that goes through. This is why I always say gaming is magic, is like black magic, how they make this happen. It's just wow. This is why we all love, any of us that are like tech nerds with all the game engine stuff and rendering stuff and all that stuff. This is why we love this stuff so much. So whether your personal preference is a console, a PC, a keyboard, a mouse and keyboard, or a controller, this goes across the boards for everything. So what games will do is a game engine will try and render everything out, and it will push it to your console's hardware. The console hardware will push it out to the signal to your monitor, right? So that signal will be that signal. Even if it downscales, it's still going to be as sharp as the original signal coming from the device that the original signal is coming from. What you will see is the game engine itself will actually tone stuff down. So the PS5 version of Horizon Forbidden West here has more of the red, like grassy brush area. What is it? Oh, it's the poison, brush area stuff. It's been a little bit since I played Horizon Forbidden West. But yes, so then they render less of that just to hold the frame rate smooth, because then this stuff has particle effects in it and such, and something like a particle effects will affect the frame rate more than anything else. So you'll see that there's particle effects happening over on the PS5 side of things. There is none on the PS4. So again, particle effects definitely takes up a lot of system resources. And this is one thing that in game development, you hear a lot of it, the cost of the game engine, how much a game engine costs on the hardware side of things. So you only have so much VRAM, you only have so much, memory allocation, you only have so much like CPU usage that you can get. Just like anything else, even if you're on PC, there's only so much VRAM that you have in your graphics card. There's only so much CPU resource usage, because some of the CPU is constantly running, like a Windows in the background, or if you have an antivirus or something, or if you are streaming from the same computer you're gaming from, everything takes up system resources. So, if you're worried about like 4K downscaling and cutting back a game from it running at full throttle, all of your FPS, it's not going to be a resolution. It's going to be whatever the developer set to run optimally. It's developer optimization on the platform, and this is where PC is kind of nice, because you can do your own optimization on it. But we've seen in the last 2-3 years, especially with the PS5 and PlayStation Studios, if the PlayStation Studios logo flashes up on there, those development teams usually do a really good job, because the PS5 is custom hardware, just like the Xbox is custom hardware. Those developers, I just tend to find, personal opinion here, my personal bias is on the PlayStation side of things. I find that the PS5 runs things a little bit smoother. It's optimized a little bit better. It just comes down to development teams knowing how to work with the hardware, through and through. The Xbox side of things is made more, it's custom hardware, but it's running more of like a Windows operating system in it. So the game engine is, if a game comes out on every single system, then you have to optimize differently for each. The game engine works with the hardware, and then the hardware goes to your monitor. There we go. So yes. It all comes down, it all comes down to optimization of the title. So you're going to see differences on each platform, and that's just because of different system resources running each game differently. A major one that we also saw was Cyberpunk. It was running mostly as smooth as it could on the PS5, Series X, and PC, but it was, it was employing it in on itself on the PS4, on the Xbox One, and so on and so on. And that just, again, because they were trying to push the game engine so hard on those platforms, the platform could not, or the device could not handle it, and the game would just implode on itself, because you need a constant data flow to happen to make sure the game runs as smooth as it possibly can. And if a system cannot handle all of the particle effects happening, that data flow can get stuttered a little bit. And that's what ends up, that's what you end up seeing, is that, yeah, you'll start to see stuff popping in and out. You'll start to see, like, they have to take away particle effects. They have to take away maybe the ray tracing that might be happening in this water right here. They might have to turn that off on the PS4, but they can make it run on the PS5. When you start having that ray tracing, though, it takes away from system resources, so maybe they have to cut the frame rate back. So it's not really has anything to do with 4K, although it kind of does, because if a developer doesn't optimize properly and they're trying to run the game at, like a checkerboard rendered 4K, but really the game should be optimized to be running at like 1440p, and then the internal of the game is downscaled to 1080, because you'll see that a lot too. Like, you'll see a 1440p close to render, then it will downscale down to 1080p, and that's how they get the 60 FPS mark to run stable. That's a big trend in the modern day systems right now. It's getting better though, where we have like 4K downscaled to 1440p, and then if you are running a 1080p output on your signal, then it downscales even more than that. So you have the sharpest looking 1080p that you could possibly have, but you also have the most steady frame rate that you could possibly have, whether it be a 60 FPS or, maybe if you're on baseline PS4, it goes down to 30 FPS. Usually they try and, clock lock it. We basically would like to say it's like a locked 30, a locked 60. Normally, even on PC, you don't ever get a locked, anything over 100 FPS. You don't really get a locked thing there. Some games do, but a lot of times the game engines will drop down into the, if it's 120, it might drop down to 100. When action really picks up, it might drop down to 95 to 85. And that's, I'm talking even like an i9 processor, or like a 12th gen i9 processor, or the latest AMD stuff with, all the NVIDIA stuff for Radeon or whatever. Anybody who says differently, they're biased with their system, and they're trying to show off their system. In all honesty, the game engines themselves have a hard time locking frame rates down, and anything over top of 60. That's just where we're at with the technology and the system resources that are available in VRAM and, memory allocation and everything else. There is certain game engines that will run games smoother than others. So a prime example of certain game engines running smoother than others is Resident Evil, the RE engine itself, that, when it's running Resident Evil or Devil May Cry or Monster Hunter or whatever. Certain game engines can do, different things better. It's just in the coding and the optimization that the development team is doing. Again, Capcom has a very, very good development team right now that can actually make, a checkerboard rendering look pretty close in motion to what a standard PC native resolution would be. Again, it all comes down to what the developers can end up doing. So I hope that this video kind of, answers a few questions. Hopefully it's also, and you can see, unless you are really like up close into your into your monitor or TV sets, you're not going to really see the difference. Unless you are like way up there like that, you're not going to see the difference. But what you will see is frame rates. And so that's why it is very important to have either lock 30 or lock 60, or go up above 60. Because in my opinion, and this is me just after seeing, the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Switch, the emulators and PC, settings and standards and everything, what I would say is if it's 60 up, it's going to look very smooth. Of course, if it's like 120 or 100 FPS and up, it's going to look smoother. But after you hit the roughly 100 FPS mark, anything above that, even if it's shifting a little bit, um, it's not going to make as much of a difference. That's one of the things. Like if it's like 96 FPS and it is shifting all over the place, you can't. Yeah, you couldn't really see that, but it's not gonna. You're not gonna see over the top of 100 FPS. You're not gonna see a huge amount of a difference unless you are really looking for it. But even then, even people that are, are always checking for this stuff, it's hard to, they get the wrong answer to it too, unless you have that frame rate counter up there in the top left or right hand corner of your screen being like, this is what the FPS is. You wouldn't know it. You really wouldn't know it if it's fluctuating or whatever, and especially when there's a lot of action on the screen. So yeah, again, hopefully this answers some of the questions that anybody had out there about like 4K and 1440p and running at higher frame rates and all that. It is a bit of a newer tech on the console side of things. They've been doing it for years on PC, but I feel like it's kind of a funny thing that if we get any higher grade hardware, so if a PS6 comes out or something, I mean, everything is getting so hot because it is running so, so top end. We might actually have water coolers in the next consoles. Think about that. So there's another little talking points that maybe we can get into in the future on a future video of like what would the next version of the consoles look like if we are trying to do like 120 FPS locked or something, and try and keep that like a native 4K with 60 locked or 120 locked or whatever the case may be with HDMI 2.1. So what I would recommend too, if you're looking to upgrade from say a 1080p display or a 1440p display or whatever, I would really recommend look for a 4K. I'd say a 4K 144 hertz at least, because then you'll be covered on both the console and the PC side of things. Because the PC, usually the game engines running on PC, they do roughly about 120 to 130. So if you're at 144 hertz, you can go up to 144 FPS, and you can pretty well lock, for like a mid to a little bit higher range PC. You can pretty well clock up there to that height. You can do 165 hertz display model, but it just, the higher hertz you go up, the more it's going to cost you. So I would say kind of like a standard, I would go 4K, 144 hertz, maybe 120 hertz if you can find one that's a little bit cheaper. HDMI 2.1 is a must, especially if you want to get higher frame rates on, at 4K, checkerboard rendered 4K on your consoles with 120 hertz on that. Like that's and VRR support would definitely help out too, because VRR helps stabilize frame rate. Outside of that, like anything that you hear of like DLSS 2.0, that's a PC thing. The consoles cannot run DLSS because that is a NVIDIA graphics card thing. So we will never see that on the consoles, but AMD does have its own follow-up to that. I do believe it's FSR, I think it is, something like that. It's you'll if you go on Digital Foundry, you can actually see a video where they break it down very well. All this video footage, by the way, is Digital Foundry footage that I've been showing off here. So it's it's just where we're at with consoles. Do I think we're going to see a PS5 Pro or anything in the future? I don't think so, because I think they can still push the console even farther with software updates. So if you can do software updates, there's no need to make new hardware, especially right now with part shortages and all that stuff. There's just no need for new hardware. So we can still push this thing, as we're going to be seeing later on this year. Hopefully, if the update goes through and they actually get the update to work well and everything, where we'll end up seeing the operating system pushed out that 1440p at 120 hertz, and maybe they can also add in VRR. I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure VRR, you have to have a monitor or TV that supports it, so it's not down to the game engine. That is up to your panel. That's why I'm saying, like, make sure you have that built into Asus. Definitely, I've seen and I've actually tested an Asus monitor with VRR running at 4K native at 120 FPS. It looks gorgeous. And they in the newest Asus panels, they have very good black levels in them, color levels, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. Look up an Asus or a Samsung's been, I do believe, trying to come out with one that has all the bells and whistles built into it too. Evo, we just saw something on that. So, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening in the future. Though there should be more of a regular update of monitors that and again, the reason why I stress about monitors, you can go with a TV setup and have like OLED and everything else, but a gaming monitor is always going to hopefully focus on like lower milliseconds of response times, and also have different like game modes built into it. I think this is going to wrap this video up though, and hopefully I was able to answer some questions and help out anybody that is wondering with upgrades to monitors or what to be looking out for in the future when it comes to all this hardware stuff. So yeah, I definitely see everybody's comments, and I answer pretty much the ones that I have a good answer for. I will throw it out there. And yeah, if anything helped you out in this video though, make sure and hit the like and share and subscribe, the bell, all that YouTube stuff. You can also come through and check out the Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Warwolf. I don't have a too well of a schedule, but I definitely stream on the regular. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this one. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by. And as always, I will see you next time.